From the alley-oops at Keyshaw to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way. From off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. A tough loss for the San Francisco 49ers against the Minnesota Vikings. They weren't able to execute at the level that 49ers have shown previously this year, and the Minnesota Vikings beat them. And let's give credit to Kirk Cousins and the Vikings offense for doing so well on third down and just taking advantage of what the 49ers defense gave them. And when it came down to it, there are certain areas you just can't afford to fail at if you expect to win football games in the NFL. First off, you cannot turn over the football more than your opponent, and the 49ers definitely did that in this game. 49ers came in plus 15 advantage over the Minnesota Vikings, yet the Minnesota Vikings won the turnover battle, and they won third down conversion rate in this game. So you got to give your hats off to them. They played well. The 49ers were definitely not the 49ers that we've seen throughout this season, and they've got to make sure they fix this. But 5-2 for the San Francisco 49ers right now, and they've got to get things turned around because they're going to be playing the Cincinnati Bengals next Sunday, and the Bengals are coming off a bye. So it's going to be tough for the San Francisco 49ers moving forward. And what's up to everyone that's in chat? Thanks for coming through. Spyman Nick Danger says, ugh. I think that was a feeling that a lot of us definitely had while watching the football game. Jan said, another brutal week. It was tough. And what happens, after these losses and now 2 losses in a row is you definitely start feeling some type of way about things that happened in this football game. So you're right, Jan. It's going to be a tough week. And Spy Nick Danger says, out-coached, out-schemed. It wasn't good, and there were some mistakes by the 49ers as far as, some of the players made mistakes. There was some coaching gaffes in this football game as well, and I'm sure the coaches would say the same thing. They want some of these plays back. Once again, the 49ers had an opportunity, even though, think about this, they played bad, and they still had an opportunity to win at the end of the football game. Of course, they weren't successful. They did not get the victory, but they are just so talented. They've got to figure this out. And hopefully they can in the next, several weeks because they need to start getting some game wins. And Spiding Danger says screen passes to death. Yeah, they definitely came after them so much in this football game. Spiding Danger saying all blitz, no sacks. The 49ers are not being able to get pressure right now with 4 guys. And this has been one of my biggest concerns with the 49ers and, everyone that listens all the way since back during training camp. There was concerns about that edge defender being able to get pressure opposite of Nick Bosa. They brought in Clelin Ferrell. Clelin Ferrell does a good job, setting the edge against the run, but he doesn't do such a great job, as far as getting home, as far as pass rush. They brought in Randy Gregory. Gregory did put pressure on Kirk Cousins today on the attempted screen pass. But other than that, he didn't get home, and really none of the front 4 got home. But until the 49ers get a legitimate option opposite of Nick Bosa, they're going to double-team the other guys, and they're going to single up that edge defender and make him win one-on-one. And right now, those guys haven't proven that they can consistently win, which means the Vikings or whoever the 49ers are playing are going to have success holding down that front 4. And let's be honest, Kirk Cousins took advantage of the 49ers blitz today. He was on point. When they brought blitz, he won a couple times, coming with a perfect screen pass. Good calls by Kevin McConnell as he was able to, do what they wanted to do. So, yeah, it wasn't great. And Josh was with me over on the PSF app. Me and Mark Adams go play by play and talk about the game the whole time during the PSF app. And Josh was leaving chat the whole time. And it was up and down. It was tough. And it just wasn't great. So Traffic, what's up, Traffic? Says, what's up, TCC? 2 weeks in a row, we played about as bad as possible with chances to win. Both that's only positive, but the TD before half was disgusting, absolutely brutal. This is probably that play, if Josh can attest to this, was probably the most critical of the 49ers coaching that I've been all season. I thought in that situation, you just can't let that happen. That is not something that a defensive coordinator should allow to happen with 16 seconds left. The Minnesota Vikings on their side of the field with no timeouts. All you have to do is play coverage, allow the ball to be completed in the middle of the field, underneath, on the Viking side of the 50-yard line. And even if they get up and spike it, they maybe have one more play. You're just, at worst, forcing a long field goal. But really, a play over the middle of the field would have probably been the end of the half, and the 49ers would have went in down 10-7. I thought that was an absolute brutal call, bringing the blitz, putting man coverage on the back end. There wasn't even enough time that if you would have created a turnover or got a big sack, that you felt your offense could have gotten the football. It was not good situational football. I'm sure that's something that Steve Wilks is going to look at, assess, and wish he could have back. But that was a critical junction in this game, and we're talking about a game that ends with a 5-point loss. And if you lose by 5 and you gave up 7 on something critical like that, it's unfortunate. So I think the 49ers are definitely going to be upset with how that went wise. But, it's one of those things you just got to continue to get better at. And I think the 49ers, got to work on it. And Steven says, bad taste in my mouth, we're getting exposed. It's crazy, right? I think it's crazy. And Coach Mike, who's a Vikings fan, says doing that without Jefferson. I think sometimes when you don't have those guys, you don't have your big-time players, sometimes it'll be a little bit easier for an offense. You're not worried about force feeding, and it can also be more difficult for a defense. So it can go both ways when people don't have their playmakers. I think the normal thought, right, if you're going to have one of their big-time players missing, that, it's going to be easier for you. I don't think it's always the case, but I thought the Vikings, players did a really good job. Jordan Addison continually got open, and when he wasn't available, then Powell got open or Osborne got open. And let's be honest, Kirk Cousins threw the ball on time in tight windows, and they caught it. And, TJ Hawkinson early in the game I thought had a big effect on the game as well. So definitely I think that those guys, played well. You tip your cap when people play well. And then the defense, it just really struggled. They did have 2 goal line stops, so we got to remember that. Bravo to them for holding up in those types of situations. But they only forced 1 punt in this game. So the interception on the first drive that Cousins throws, good play by Travarius Ward. Then after that, there's just no open frames. It's touchdowns, it's field goals, and just some egregious, mistakes by the 49ers. And that's what Josh is saying here. Was it me, or did Wilks have arrogant play calling, just stuck to his guns even when it wasn't working? I think, to be honest with you, Josh, I think Wilks was trying to make something happen. So they were struggling early on in this football game to get off the field. They didn't have answers for what Kevin McConnell and the Vikings were doing on offense. And so he was taking some chances. He was trying to bring extra pressure. He was trying to disrupt the timing that Kirk Cousins had in the pocket because he couldn't get home with 4. And I thought that they did a really good job, the Vikings did, on hitting the screens on the second drive. As soon as Steve Wilks felt he needed to be aggressive and get after the Vikings turned to the screen game with great success. Multiple different types of screens, and they really took advantage of the 49ers' eagerness to get after Kirk Cousins and get him irritated and off his spot. And whenever you do that, you run the risk of being burned by it. And I thought the 49ers were in this game, and you got to tip your cap to the Vikings. It was a very good game plan on their part. The way they were taking advantage of Hawkinson early, just finding him underneath, finding him in zones, and then later on starting to stretch it with Addison. And that throw on the first touchdown, Jordan Addison, that is a spectacular throw. Tyshawn Gibson gets held just enough in the center of the field, and then Trey Greenlaw doesn't get quite vertical enough, but that's a tight window throw that he makes. You credit him. There's not a lot of quarterbacks in this league that make that throw, rip it on time, and get it to their open receiver. So I tipped the cap, all the while realizing that there were some mistakes that the 49ers made, both coaching and also, with the play on the field. And that's how you just gotta learn from these things. Ryan says our defense is now a weakness. Here's what's interesting about the defense. They gave up 23 points in this game. They gave up 22 points in this game. It's not what you want to give up. But when it comes to scoring defense, the 49ers are still one of the best in the league. They give up 14.5 coming into this game, so they gave an extra touchdown and such to the Minnesota Vikings. But the defense is, even though they didn't play well, because I want to make that clear, they didn't play well, they're still not giving up 30-plus points. They're hanging in there. I mean, the most that they've given up this year was 23 to Los Angeles Rams. So as far as scoring defense, they've done good. I think in this situation, though, it was a struggle. And once the 49ers offense turned over the football in the red zone, we're talking McCaffrey's fumble, that caused the 49ers to lose at least 3 points. The Jake Moody first field goal that he missed, that caused the 49ers to miss points. That's a 6-point swing. They lost by 5. I think those things are hypercritical in a game like this, and I think it also set the tone. 49ers coming off an interception by Charvarius Ward, and the 49ers walk away with no points because of a Christian McCaffrey fumble. If you walk away with a touchdown on that drive, you're the one playing from in front, which the 49ers have been doing all year, and I think that significantly altered the outcome of the game. So I get what you're saying, though, and Ryan M says where it was BA in the second half. Well, the Vikings started trying to take away BA. So when they started trying to take away BA, that opened up George Kittle. If you notice, George Kittle had a big second half. Christian McCaffrey, a big second half in the passing game, and that's what's big. And on the PSF app, I actually talked about this right before it happened. I said to Josh, Josh was saying, hey, Kyle normally abandons the run game. And I say, hey, this is when you have to get creative with the run game. This is when you need to run those extended plays to the sideline, the passes to McCaffrey that are like extended run plays. They did it, boom, touchdown. So, I think that the Vikings knew that they needed to take away Brandon Ayuk in the second half. They went to do that. 49ers had opportunities with Kittle, McCaffrey, Jawan Jennings to get things done. It just didn't, really work out. And Josh says, how many illegal contacts and PIs did we have? A lot, and I think the 49ers definitely, get some here and there. They're playing a lot of man coverage, and whenever you play a lot of man coverage, you're going to have opportunities for those type of penalties. And then you got the Vikings, because the 49ers aren't able to get home with 4, starting to run double moves, and you're getting the aggressiveness of the 49ers defensive backs wanting to make a play. Whenever you're trying to make a play and trying to do something big for your football team, instead of just letting the play come to you, you can sometimes get a little bit in between where you want to be and make some mistakes. And I thought there was a couple of penalties that were legit. There's always the ones that are questionable. But for the most part, I thought this was a pretty well officiated game. And, you just, unfortunately, when you're in man coverage and stuff like that, you are more susceptible to those kinds of penalties. So, Coach Mike says Niners had great playmakers, just a bad play calling today defensively. Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. Steve Wilkes wasn't on top of his game. Last week, he played it too soft against P.J. Walker, and I think this time he got too jumpy and too antsy and wanted to make something happen against Kirk Cousins and be aggressive, and it was a struggle. And let's be honest, with the Vikings being able to run the football a little bit in the first half, it definitely made things harder on the 49ers. 49ers weren't having them face as many third and longs as they wanted. And that first one was probably the most pivotal, where TJ Hawkinson runs a little middle screen there all by himself, just, is blocking and then releases. And Fred Warner had dropped so far vertically that he's unable to get up there and make the tackle in time. And, I thought after that, the momentum really got going. I think if they could have got a stop right there, got the ball right back, it could have negated the momentum gained by the Christian McCaffrey fumble. But the 49ers were turning over the footballs here, so not great. And WTM said, I'm ready to start my Sam Darnold campaign. Don't do it. None of that. Brock Purdy, made some mistakes. He threw the 2 interceptions today to Bynum. The one on the last drive, that was a bad play. The one with Jennings, I'm not sure why he threw it so far inside, but I'm not ready to go down that road yet. Brock Purdy had a bad game in the second half. I thought in the first half he was really, really good. I thought in the second half he had some mistakes, but he's still a young guy learning, and I want to see him grow from this, and I want to see him get better from this. And if he can, then you're fine with it, But these losses always sting, but it doesn't mean you turn and look for somebody else to fill that role. I don't believe Sam Darnold, could have the effectiveness that Brock Purdy's had in this offense. So I'm not ready to go there, but I'm going to go ahead and tongue-in-cheek chuckle at that for sure, because I thought that was kind of funny that you said that for sure. And Coach Mike says sometimes you have to rely on your playmakers to make plays instead of trying to call the play to make the play. I think that's true. I think you do have to rely on your playmakers doing, making plays and getting things done. And Josh says, how concerned are we about the defensive line looking like a weakness as of late? I think it's definitely something that the 49ers are got to be concerned about. And, of course, like I said, I've been a little bit concerned about that opposite edge rusher of Bosa. Even with Randy Gregory coming in, I don't think we have the depth. I don't think we're getting the play that we're desired to be getting from, like Drake Jackson. I don't think we're getting the pass rush from Cleveland Farrell. So they've got to find something there. Of course, interior defensive line is supposed to be a real strength, and you're getting some of that. But the same regard, today they were really quiet up front, and I didn't think that was going to be the case. We've seen consistently Hargrave, Armstead, and Kinlaw put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. Well, today, Reisner and the inside portion, Bradbury and those guys of the Vikings, I thought they did a really good job in the interior defensive line. The pocket wasn't really collapsing. There was not a lot of pressure from Bosa or the opposite edge either. It's something that the 49ers are going to have to look at. I don't know exactly why they're not getting the penetration they normally got, but they are going to have to address that a little bit. And Josh says no pressure and our cornerbacks are going to get cooked. That's right. That's the thing. If you don't get pressure on the opposing quarterback, he's going to have the time to navigate, go through, and make his reads. You've got to quicken up his internal clock. That was one of my keys this week against Kirk Cousins, was speeding up his internal clock and making him get rid of the football before he wanted to. If he's able to sit back and go through his reads, he's completely capable of making the proper read and getting the ball on time to his receivers. He throws very catchable footballs and executes at a high level. So what you saw was inability to get to Kirk Cousins and him taking advantage of that inability and making some plays. So, yeah, to me, it was really big by him. That is for sure. Josh says can't stop Powell either. Mike says time of possession means a lot in games like this. It does. As your defense starts to wear down, a lot of it was self-inflicted wounds by the defense not being able to get off the field. And it was something the Vikings weren't really good at. They were losing time of possession. They weren't converting on third down consistently. Then they came into this game and they absolutely tore it up. And so you got to give them credit for that. They did what they needed to do, and ultimately it kept the 49ers defense on the field. And the 49ers didn't run the ball very effectively. And when they did get it going in the second half, they were playing from behind. So the 49ers are really good. If they get in front, they're able to play in front. But early on, they turned over the football, and they weren't able to get those points that they needed. Hugo says, what's up with the blitz there at the end of the first half? It was a bad call. That's just what it is, Hugo. That's just defensive coordinator should not have made that call. You should not be in zero coverage in that type of situation. They should have been playing, too high safety look. They should have been playing quarters, make everything go underneath, play, that halo style defense, tackle underneath, put your feet at the 50-yard line. Everything underneath gets tackled, and then they have no timeouts. They let the clock run. You're going to use at least 10 to 12 seconds on that play. Maybe they have 5 or 6. The odds of getting a field goal are not very good. So it was just a bad call at the in that juncture. So it was really upsetting to see. And I think that's, like I said, the most critical I've been of the 49ers coaching staff this entire year. I think they want that one back for sure. And Randy says Burrows will be fun next week. Can't. The thing is, right, it's the same thing every week. You've got to get pressure on the quarterback with 4. You've got to be able to limit the run game, make them one-dimensional. And if you can't do that, then you're going to run a risk of losing. And let's be honest, the Vikings played winning football today. The 49ers didn't play winning football today. When you lose the turnover battle, when you lose time of possession, when you lose third down conversion rate, you're probably going to lose the game. And that's what happened here. The crazy thing is the 49ers are so talented on both sides of the football that they had an opportunity to win. And when it came down to it, they couldn't get it done. They couldn't execute. in the brightest of moments on prime time with the game on the line. And now they've got to go back. They got to regroup, and they got to figure this thing out. And people got to look in the mirror, and they got to realize, hey, we've got to make some plays. And that doesn't just go with the players. That's coaches as well. And the coaches will wear this one, I guarantee you. Knowing the character of Kyle Shanahan and Steve Wilkes, they'll own it. But yeah, that's not looking good. Next week is going to be a tough one. That is for sure. And Ryan says our 2 losses, we have not had a great run game. If we have any weaknesses in offense, it's that when we don't have a threat of running the ball, defenses are able to sit back and wait for Brock to throw. Yeah, I think that's big, and that part of the reason why is you lose a little bit of effectiveness with no Trent Williams. When you don't have Trent Williams there, number one, you know for sure he's going to negate one pass rusher on that side of the football. You just don't have to worry about it. Number two, he's very effective in the run game. Not only can he win at the point of attack, but he can also get to the second level. He can run people down. He's really effective in a tremendous amount of areas. So when you're missing an all-pro left tackle, it can be huge for your football team. Where Minnesota was having Darrisaw there, so they could go ahead and help in other areas and put Darrisaw one-on-one and know that they were going to have a good chance of victory. The 49ers weren't able to do that. With that being said, I thought Jalen Moore held up as good as he could in this football game, but your run offense definitely took a step back as far as not having Trent Williams in the game. And, of course, whenever you don't have Debo, you also lose just a threat of what Debo can potentially do. So I think that's something that we're going to see as the 49ers get Trent Williams back and get Debo back. By the time we get to Jacksonville, hopefully the 49ers will be full speed ahead coming off their bye week. But next week's going to be a tough. I don't know if Trent will be out there. We know Debo's not, and the 49ers still have to adjust. Randy says no one wants to hear it, but Brock was very Jimmy. It's unfortunate. I don't know exactly what happened there with that throw to Juwan Jennings. But the one thing I'll say about Brock, he doesn't look as happy feet in the pocket as Jimmy did. But yeah, the turnovers, the interceptions over the middle of the field were more reminiscent of what we saw from Jimmy Garoppolo in his career. But I think sometimes that's just where you're going to see those things because, I think that's where things happen in Kyle Shanahan's offense. So it's tough. And Greg says the way we're going, we're looking at 10-7, maybe win the division. We'll see. I think it's a little early, to get on that. And I see Greg has another one here. It says we will lose to Cincy next week. Right now, I think that's a lot of people's thoughts. I'm not ready to go there yet. I think the 49ers still have a good football team. I know Cincinnati's playing a lot better, and Joe Burrow is a tough player, but 49ers are back at Levi Stadium. And also, we just saw the 49ers lose 2 games we expected them to win. Why all of a sudden wouldn't they win the one they potentially should lose, right? So I think this is a game. It's going to be a tough matchup. It's an AFC matchup. You don't want to lose it. But I think the 49ers know they need to regroup and get after it. So it's tough. And WTM always comes with the grade, says, what grade do you give Coach Steve Wilkes tonight? I can't give him a high grade. I'll tell you that much. I thought that call at the end of the first half alone was enough to put him in the C category. And then, after that, I don't think he ever really got a good grip what the Vikings were doing. I don't think he ever got a good grip on his calls, per se. I'm not going to give him an outright F or anything like that, but I would say, anything D+ to C- would be realistic. Anything in the C range is fine. I'm going to go with more of a range, but it was that play wasn't good. And then I don't know, Josh, are you talking about, you say Hunter a 49er by weekend? I don't think they trade Danielle Hunter now. The Minnesota Vikings have a pretty favorable schedule coming up with some winnable football games. I think they're going to make a go of this. I think that they believe that they can win next week, and if they win next week, they're back at 500. I think the Vikings aren't trading anyone. I think they're going to be in the mix now to see what happens. So I don't think Danielle Hunter gets traded now, and I think the 49ers are going to have to look other ways. But I do think they need to address the edge rush situation. Randy Gregory is a nice rotation and a guy that can add, but they're not willing to play him, more downs than he's playing. At the end of the game, they had Drake Jackson in. When they almost had that sack on Kirk Cousins, it was not it was not Randy Gregory in there, it was Drake Jackson. So I think it's something interesting, that we'll have to see how it goes. And Greg G says Wilkes should be fired, I'm guessing is what you're saying. I'm not ready to go there as far as firing Steve Wilkes. We've seen Robert Saleh have these types of mistakes. We've seen D'Amico Ryans have mistakes at the end of football games. Those things suck. Coaches make mistakes. They're humans, and so they do things out of impulse without weighing and knowing situation that happens. What you just make sure is you never do it again. And I think that's what Steve Wilkes is going to have to do in this category. Do I think it was pretty egregious? Absolutely. You can't let those things happen. I've coached on coaching staffs where this happened. When I was a position coach, we had a defensive coordinator call something very similar and ended up being a big first half touchdown, the same situation. And it was just egregious. There's no reason for it, but it happens. And I think when it happens, you just make sure it never happens again. Eduardo says right tackle, corner, or DN, spend that money considering Purdy had no time to throw, but also defense is playing like crap. I think that's a little bit of an overreaction, Eduardo. I get you're frustrated, but I don't think the offensive line played like crap today, or the offensive line didn't do good and gave Brock Purdy no time, because I know I misread what you said, considering Purdy had no time to throw. I think he did have some time. I think once the 49ers were playing from behind and they knew there wasn't going to be a consistent run game, or then they were able to kind of attack and be more aggressive in the second half. But I thought Jalen Moore and them held up pretty good. One of the times Brock Purdy got pressure, it was a miss by Charlie Warner. So I don't think they played like crap or really bad, and that Brock had no time. But, I think anytime you could upgrade any of those positions you talked about, right tackle, corner, or defensive end, you got to think about it. And, that's one thing that Lynch said this week. He's not willing to make up a splash. So if you could make a splash, go ahead and go do it. Randy says, I don't like Wilkes up in the booth either. Very low energy. I'll be honest with you, as somebody that's coached before, as a coordinator especially, you don't want to coach with energy. You want to have clear minds as you're going to make your play. You don't want distractions on the sidelines. I have no problems with a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator being in the booth and being able to make all the necessary notes and really chart things out and make clear, concise calls. That's not the issue. The energy has nothing to do with it. I think it just came down to a mistake for sure that time. So that's what he's going to have to get better at. And we got Mr. Laughs says, where's Sam Darnold, the 7th rounder, starting to show? Coach Ant, please help. It ain't that time yet. Let's be honest. Brock Purdy, he had some struggles last week in Cleveland, and he looked really good for about 3 quarters of this game. In the fourth quarter, he made 2 mistakes, and it's unfortunate that he made those mistakes. Both of those were potential game-winning drives. So Brock Purdy's going to have to prove at some point that he can make those plays and win those types of football games, but you can't be ready to throw him out yet. You just got to expect him to, continue to grow. And if he continues to make these mistakes, yes, it's tough, and it's going to cost you some football games. And then you might have to think about it. But right now, this is a small sample size. And I think if you guys go back in the history of the 49ers, you're going to see lots of quarterbacks that had stretches. They struggled, times they made mistakes. There's quarterbacks, some of the greatest of all time, have had 3 and 4 interception games. I'm not ready to put, of course I'm not putting Brock in that category. I'm just giving an illustration that sometimes you just got to weather some of these storms and hope that he can learn from those and you can make better decisions, from it. So I'm okay with, what's happening with the 49ers right now. But yeah, some of these guys are going to have to step up. I think they're going to just have to get better. Coach Mike says Vikings had sketchy calls as well. Ugly game coaching-wise all around. A lot to take away from a game like this as a coach. Yeah, you're either way when you watch the film. You're either happy with it or upset with it on every single play. I think there was some lack of execution on both sides. I think there was lack of great calls on both sides, maybe decisions that they would like to have back. But when you're the team that wins, you can at least have a little bit of a different film room, a sigh of relief with your mistakes compared to the team that lost. And I think the 49ers are going to have some tough room this week as they go in there and they have to watch this film. The truth is, the light said blame Purdy. No one told him to throw picks and stall in the red zone more than 3 times. I mean, you can blame Brock Purdy if you want. I don't think that he was the reason that Christian McCaffrey fumbled. I don't think he was the reason that Jake Moody missed a field goal. I don't think he was the reason that Jawan Jennings dropped a 3rd down completion. So, yeah, did Brock Purdy make mistakes? 2 interceptions? Absolutely. Does he have to wear it for those 2 interceptions? Absolutely. You know who else has to wear it? Every single other player that made mistakes. From Jawan Jennings and Charlie Warner missing a block on the edge that resulted in a 3-yard loss on McCaffrey, to Colton McKivitz getting beat by Daniil Hunter that caused a Brock Purdy sack. There are plenty of mistakes and plenty of blame to go around. It's just often highlighted by the quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, you can blame Brock Purdy if you want, but there's plenty of blame to go around from players to coaches. And let's be honest, every player makes mistakes. Josh says no Debo next week, so expect the same struggles offensively. You know what? You can expect that with all things. There's different matchups. So you're going to be going against a different a different Cincinnati Bengals team who has different skill players at different positions, and how they play is different with their scheme. So it could mean the same thing, or it could mean something entirely different. I do know this: it's a lot easier with Deebo Samuel in the lineup than without him. So it's one less thing that the team has to prepare for. So the 49ers have to get back there, regroup, and prepare to play Cincinnati and hope that they can win and improve to 6-2. And I think that's what you always got to try. And Greg says all year long, no pressure except for Hargrave. You're right. I mean, most of the time the 49ers have had to dial it up even to get Bosa home. Last week's sack by Bosa came because of a blitz. And so you're right. They've had a hard time getting pressure with their front four. Hargrave's the one that's been getting home the most. He has 3 sacks on the season. So, yeah, the expectation is that we need something. And what's been going on? Well, they've been double teaming, 3 parts of the 49ers 4-man front, and they've been letting that, defender, the edge defender, go one-on-one. Now, today, a couple times it got varied up where they went ahead and sent 2 guys the way of the opposite edge defender when it was Randy Gregory, and they left either Armstead or Hargrave one-on-one, mostly Armstead, and the 49ers didn't get wins in those scenarios. So, yeah, right now the guy who singled up has to win, and the 49ers aren't getting it, and that's one of the things I made clear when I was watching the game earlier, is that was the thing that separated the 49ers in 2019 from everyone else, is that if you put Dee Ford, Nick Bosa, Buckner, or Armstead in one-on-one situations, they were going to win. And right now, we're not getting that from the 49ers front defensive line, so they've got to get better. And Steve Wilkes has got to find a way. Does he need to run twists? Does he need to run TE stunts? What does he need to do to help those guys create separation and get home to the quarterback? That's something they have to figure out this week. Greg says, Kyle was fine. It's Wilkes. He calls a terrible game. I thought last week the criticisms were the too high safety look against, a backup quarterback. I thought those were warranted. I understood what he was trying to do. He was trying to make him automatically check into a run, get a run stop, force him to 3rd down, and then get off the field. I understand the conversation of what he's trying to do, but overall execution of the game plan wasn't working. 49ers couldn't stop Cleveland's run. And then this week, I think it's really highlighted by the egregious play at the end of the first half. I think if that wasn't there, we might not be over the top on Steve Wilkes as far as completely down on him. We would probably be upset that the 49ers gave up so many points and didn't cause any punts. But, I think that's just something to remember. Hugo says, any word on the guys from IR coming back, Gray, Beal? I don't think you're going to see Beal this year. I don't think that you're going to see Darrell Luter Jr. this year, to be honest with you. I think they're going to redshirt both those players. As far as Danny Gray, I just don't think they have a roster spot for him. Now, I mean, they would have to decide to do something with Ronnie Bell, and right now Ronnie Bell's healthy, so I don't know. I don't know how they're going to get Danny Gray back and, being able to play. Greg says, I threw up on the TD late in the second quarter. That one was bad. What's up, Ziggy? My guy Ziggy's in here. Says, wow, what a horrible game. It was tough. That was a tough watch. Definitely when it ended, I had to sit there and kind of chill for 5 minutes. I told Mark, he asked me if I'm going live. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and chill a little bit here, and then I'll get on because it was a little bit tough there. Greg says Wilkes called press coverage and all-out blitz with 10 seconds and 0 Viking timeouts. Yep. Unfortunately, that's what happened. That was the one that got everyone's attention. What's up, Phil? Phil's in the house. Says Wilkes should have put in Mason or Mitchell in, if only to show defense is a different look. Well, what I thought was interesting is I believe Elijah Mitchell got 1 carry during the game, and it had no chance. Like, Minnesota blew through in the interior defensive line, studded him up. He had no chance. McCaffrey was pretty much in on every single snap. I will say this, McCaffrey, the Kyle finding ways to get McCaffrey the football in the second half. The run game started to open up. I don't know what the 49ers saw on film that made them believe they were going to be able to run the ball inside early on in this game. Maybe they didn't want to put pressure, on Colton McKivitz or on Jalen Moore on the edge to make their blocks. Or, maybe they were worried about DJ Wanham or, Daniil Hunter. But for whatever reason, they were struggling. Later on in the game, they ran the extended run play out to McCaffrey that resulted in a touchdown, and then later hit an outside zone play to the left for a big 9-yard gain for McCaffrey. So whatever reason, the game plan adjusted at some point. They started getting a little bit of action in the run game, but Minnesota did a good job. So I don't know what they saw on film that made them go that way. I know a lot of people want to see Jordan Mason, and Elijah Mitchell and see what they can do. I will say this, as a coach, you do pull players off the field, to make sure that your players are resting or healthy. For the most part, if you can keep your number one player out there, you do, because your percentages of having success go up with every single play that he's out there. And just like you saw in this game, McCaffrey's the one that scored both touchdowns. So his effectiveness is still felt in the football game, and that's why you have to have him out there, especially with Debo not in. One thing Kyle talked about this week was that as long as you don't have Debo, Christian McCaffrey can handle some of the Debo role. So that's why a lot of times you go ahead and you keep him in the football game. So, yeah, I think that, I get what you're saying, but you just kind of have to, understand that you want to have your best possible players and get them in there. JLE says maybe Hunter Henry. I think that, tight end is always something you can look at. I don't think Charlie Warner had a great showing today. He's ineffective in the passing game. You saw what happened when they got a second tight end involved today where they threw a screen pass to Ross Dwelly. I think adding an extra tight end and a weapon to Kyle's offense could be a facet that they go with. I don't know if the Patriots would make Hunter Henry available. If they decided to make him available, him or Mike Gesicki, then, yeah, I mean, those are options. I think Hunter Henry's definitely the better of the two because of his ability to block. So it's tough. It's tough. Mr. Laugh says, Purdy, you hurt my feelings. Yeah, I think there's a lot of hurt feelings. We care about our team and we want our team to win. And in the grand scheme, it didn't happen. You know what I mean? It just didn't happen. Mr. Laugh says, I like the grades that WTM be asking. So there you go. Giving approval to it. I like that. Let's see. Randy says, when CMC scored the touchdown, there was no reason for there to be a minute left on the clock. Oh, yeah. I mean, you're talking at the end of the half. Let's be honest. Like, in that part of the game, you just have to make sure you get a touchdown. I know you want to run as much of that clock down as possible, but the defense did their job initially. So you had Charvarius Ward, who turned back KJ Osborne and made him go backwards before he went out of bounds, which kept the clock running. That was huge. Then you had the tackle on Hawkinson as soon as he caught the ball underneath, which forced the 3rd and long, and the Minnesota Vikings had to use their clock. So there was 16 seconds left, and they weren't even close to being to midfield. So you didn't have to go with the zero coverage, all-out blitz. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. So that's kind of where the question marks were. I thought the defense executed at a high level before that. And, that's what happens when you got to just make sure you get it done and execute. Let's see. Greg's talking about some things that happened in the game. Him and Randy are having a nice conversation about that, last part of the game. I get it. What's up, Mr. Corey? Mr. Corey's in the house. But here we go. Let's see what Mr. Corey has to say. And I've been shaking my head for 3 hours. Well, hopefully you have a good chiropractor. You're probably going to need it. You're going to keep shaking your head. And if you have me on Patreon, you're going to go watch my L22 this week. I guarantee you're probably going to shake your head even more because I kept it real last week. I'm going to keep it real this week. It was very fun to hear the things that I talked about. We talked about Kyle Shanahan, talked about him. Steve Wilkes talked about him. So that's what I'm going to do on Patreon this week. WT says both almost 1 second away from like 5 sacks. Right? I think that's how it is right now. He's just not able to get home. Just not finishing these things off. And that's what Josh is saying. We need a speed on that defensive line. That's what was the difference between some of the other defensive lines the 49ers had, right? One thing I think they're missing if they can't get that edge defender that has tremendous speed is an interior defensive lineman that can consistently get pressure on his own, right? That's why the 49ers had the Arden Key role, or it was Charles Omenihu, or it was Samson Ebukam rushing from the inside. Call the Tennessee Titans, what's up, Arden Key? Do you want to come back? And the reason I say that is because on obvious pass downs, it might be important for the 49ers to pull Eric Armstead off the field. And I hate to say that, but pulling him or Hargrave off the field and getting another defensive pass rusher out there could be exactly what they need. I don't think that they have that guy on the roster right now, though. You know, I mean, before they had guys that could do it, but right now they don't have that guy that can get it done. So that's where they gotta continue to work. Let's see right here. Mr. Corey says, I hope to God they trade for Chase Young. This pass rush is overrated. They do need to make a move, you know, and they need to bring in an edge defender, I believe. If Randy Gregory become a rotational piece with Cleveland Farrell, I think that would be a good situation for the 49ers. I don't think Danielle Hunter is going to be available anymore. I think the Vikings are going to keep him. I think they're going to make a run at this thing. I think if they win next week, there's no reason for them to trade Danielle Hunter at 4-4. So it could change everything. And Ashton G says, keep your heads high. You guys are only 5-2, still a long way to go. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great way to put it. Is like, why? Like, there's still, you know, plenty of time to go ahead and make a play. You know, and the 49ers are going to have chances. I mean, they're going to have opportunities to get stuff done. That's for sure. So let's see here. WTM says, Coach Ant, it feels like we're going backwards. Why does it feel like this, Coach Ant? Please help. It's just a struggle of the season. The 49ers, you know, really last week they had an opportunity. They should have won that game. They didn't play up to potential. And this week they made mistakes and they didn't play good and they fell off kilter. And this happens sometimes, especially in long seasons and seasons where you're playing really good football teams. You make mistakes and those are compounded. And then next thing you know, you're losing football games. And all you got to do is make sure you go back and you respond. And you just don't want it to be quicksand. You don't want to start anticipating making mistakes. You don't want to start anticipating, losing football games. You want to go out there and feel like you compete and you can win any game you're in. And the truth is the 49ers roster puts them in that type of situation. So it's something that the 49ers definitely got to get going. Greg says Chase Young would be a great pickup. We need more pressure. And, you know, he's been producing pressure this year. So I got to give him credit. For what he's doing. Mr. Corey says, I don't remember a more embarrassing loss than this. Well, there's been lots of them. I'm telling you, there's been lots of them. The 49ers, even when they had Bill Walsh, had some embarrassing losses. The most embarrassing loss that Bill Walsh ever had was against the Minnesota Vikings in the 1987 divisional playoffs. All you have to do is listen to him say it from his own. They could not stop Anthony Carter. So there has been, you know, you probably don't remember them. Losing a game to the Raiders in 1988 where the 49ers got shut out 10-0 or 9-0. That was an embarrassing loss. There has been them. You just don't remember them right now because your history bias, you know, goes away. But, yeah, I mean, this is one you don't want for sure. Jay Hill's in the house. It says 12 games including playoffs, Bosa, 3.5 sacks. Well, I mean, I think that Bosa needs help. I honestly do. I think he needs somebody on the opposite side or another interior pass rusher, like I said, like an Arden Key or somebody that can help get it done. JLE says, or another cornerback. Yeah, I mean, I think this is interesting with the cornerback because I think if you help the pass rush, if the pass rush started getting home, the defensive backs would be really good. Delmer Lenore and Travaris Ward have been battling all year. I know Travaris Ward gave up the big one to Addison when he should have had the interception, but, you know, I'm not completely down on it. Mr. Corey says, bring DJ Jones back to stop the run. He would definitely do that. He would definitely still do that. So I think that's something that the 49ers could definitely think about. And Jason says Niners need a number 2 wide receiver. Does that mean do you not think that Brandon Ayuk or Bo Samuel are number 2 wide receiver? Please put that in the comments. I'm curious about that. Brad says one kind of positive is we had a lot less flags today. Yeah, I think so. And I don't think what happened in Cleveland is indicative of what's going to happen this season. I'm going to be honest with you. So Jay Hill and Jay Ellie are agreeing. He says, agreed, Jason, or another tight end. So we got some nice comments going on here. Lost 2 games by a total of 7 points, right? Think about that. Not exactly the time to throw in the towel in the season. And it's not just that you lost them by 7 points, but you had the opportunity to win both football games. You could say as much. I mean, we're talking about bad, egregious plays, right? We're talking about bad play, yet you could win. Think about that. In the NFL, that is tough to come by. Mr. Corey says right here, that's why I'm glad Washington lost, so Washington packs it in and trades us young. They have Philly next week. And I believe I heard today that their GM actually called around offering up Sweat and Chase Young. So they are looking to make something happen there. So I think that, see this right here, this is one of those ones. Vikings were without Jefferson too. Sheesh. But the 49ers were without Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams. Like, both teams are missing players. When it comes down to it, it's just execution on the plays. Randy says we need a shutdown corner. I think that's what you're paying Charvarius Ward to be. And I mean, I'll be honest with you. It doesn't matter who the edge guy or who the corner is. If they're not playing at a high level, like if you're not getting pressure on the outside from a defensive line, your corner, it don't matter who it is. I mean, there's not Darrell Revises and Deion Sanders around, and even them with enough time, receivers can win. So I get the sentiment. Jay Hill says Brock came up small late in the 4th. That concerns me. He was okay late last week. Yeah. I mean, he made a mistake. If you want to call it coming up small, you can call that. I think people are hypercritical of situations without a large sample size. So I think that there are opportunities, for them to make plays in this game, and they didn't do it. So, that's really unfortunate. But that's kind of the way that the game goes sometimes, guys. So I wouldn't call it small though. I don't think so. Cornbread Gerald says, even though we lost, hit that like button. Thanks, you. I appreciate that. I really do. Mr. Corey says Chase Young is 4th in the league in pressures with 5 sacks. I'm in, Mr. Corey. You don't have to convince me. I really appreciate that. And thanks to Matt from North Valley Empire. Really appreciate that. He says, good stuff, Ed. Hit the like button. You're not going to find more genuine 49ers YouTube content. I really appreciate that. And if you guys like any youth football, you guys like watching highlights and stuff like that during the week, go check out North Valley Empire. They do it the best in the 209 and really anywhere around the 209. They're all over the place, but good stuff coming from them and good people and good friends. So go check out their stuff. Give them a subscription. Check out some of their highlight videos. They had a couple shorts this year. One of them, I think on Instagram, a reel, went to 1 million views. So they're putting out good content over there, guys. Go check it out. Randy says the Super Bowl year we lost every game by just a few points too. It happens. I mean, you lose games, right? I mean, not every year you can go in there and blow teams away. Not every year is 1989. You go 14-2 and smoke everyone. There's always 1988s where you go 10-6. You know what I mean? Like, these things just happen. So I think you got to remember that when you're talking about football games. And Hugo says nobody remembers about second place. With that said, I still believe the 49ers have the answers on this roster. You're right. I mean, nobody thinks about second place, right? I mean, Nelly, 2 is not a winner, and 3 nobody remembers. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. Like, I think I just said the lyrics wrong, but you get the sentiment. Yeah. Mr. Corey says Purdy hasn't even played a full season yet, fellas. I know that's the thing. I mean, do we want him to make these mistakes and these turnovers? No. But he's still a young player, and he's only got 3 interceptions on the season, and 2 of them are in this game. And I know it's compounded by the fact that he's had 3 in the last 2 weeks, but let's let the guy grow. Let's let him make mistakes. And, these are the things that we're willing to do with Trey Lance, right? I mean, most of the fan base said, you're willing to let Trey Lance make mistakes, and you got a young quarterback that hasn't made as many, I think we just got to let him have, that time and let things happen. Mr. Corey says better to have weaknesses exposed before the trade deadline than afterwards. Yeah, I think so. At JL, he says, hey, Brock's still learning. He's still growing. And I think those are fair sentiments. He definitely is, and I think there's a lot of players on this team that are still growing and still learning. And the key to it is just to make sure that you execute when you're supposed to execute and you do what you're supposed to do. And right now he had a couple mistakes, and he's going to learn from those. Everybody's hoping he doesn't make the same mistakes next week. And that's all you can hope for when it comes to Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers. But, guys, I'm going to check out. Thanks for joining me for this game reaction show. Looking forward to content during the week. Join me on YouTube. Join me on Patreon. Join me on 49ers Cutback on Believe. All of them will have content available. So come through and check it out. And then, we'll get to the content this week. Film breakdowns available on Patreon. So if you want to see where things went wrong and where things went right, you join me on Patreon. It'll be really, really good. And, of course, just like always, you can join me and Jay Hill. We're going to be have that show out over on Patreon as well. So thanks, everyone, for coming through. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.